Well, thanks again for, pardon me, thanks again for jumping in here on Sunday, November 2nd for this statewide Tiger Team meeting. Our biggest goals for today are to look at the sight reading standards that we discussed at our meeting 2 weeks ago and that was sent out about a week and a half ago. And then we're just going to kind of create a punch list of here are the things that we'd like to get done by January 25th. So if everyone's cool, I'm going to go on and share my screen with those sight reading standards pulled up here for everyone to see, and then we can just look at them and start some open conversations about it. All right, I'm hoping everyone can see it now. So, as we discussed at the last meeting, and jump in anytime because I no longer see you guys, so I won't see like your hands being raised or anything like that. So, just like I said, jump in and interrupt anytime. We have different sight reading standards for grades 9, 10, and 11, 12. And we basically have four different tiers. One that would go in effect in fall of 2026 through fall of 2029. One that would go into effect in 2030. One that would go into effect in 2034. And then one that would go into effect through 2038. This does not have to be where Tennessee ends. We can continue beyond 2038. But the thought that we discussed at the last meeting is that we didn't want to just set something and then not have a vehicle by which we continue to revisit it. And we thought that maybe it would be smart to go on and create different tiers just so that teachers have that long-term vision of here's what my students need to know now, but here's ultimately what our students need to know to be able to successfully sight read at our regional pre-all-state auditions. So as you can see, in the first tier that would go into effect next fall, 4 measures and 8 measures for the two different groups. You can see where they start, the pitch that is played at the beginning, what the excerpt will end on, any leaps that are included in there, what the range of the entire exercise would be, the rhythms included, any rests that would be included, time signatures, any other elements which don't kick in for a while, study time, and then the percent of score. And then just for my last little bit to introduce it, we also discussed at our last meeting that given that this will be a change for 2 out of the 3 regions for sure in terms of rigor, that it would be smart, since it's going to be new for everyone, to start in fall of 2026 for sight reading to be implemented, but for it to count 0% of a student's score, but then immediately to change that in the fall of 2027. So I'm going to leave this pulled up here on the screen, and then people just jump on in and let me know your thoughts.
Well, I think it's great work, Brian. I appreciate your work on this. I think it makes sense. I love the timeline. I love how much it's gonna, you can see, a decade down the road where it's going. I think that'll help us on a lot of different levels, not just high school, but hopefully earlier to start being able to set goals about what we would want our students to ideally to be able to know when they show up to high school and start working all the way down through elementary school. Um, what did you say about the first year it being it's 0% and then it bumps up to that first?
So yeah, in 2027, it would be 5% for freshmen, sophomores, and 5% for juniors and seniors. It would remain at 5% through 2029 for freshmen, and then would up to in the fall of 2028 to 10% for the juniors and seniors.
Okay, cool. So this is just to get this right in my head. We're talking about all this sight reading would happen at the East, West, and Middle regional auditions. or are we talking about eventually sight reading as part of the actual all-state audition?
As of right now, this all would happen at the regional auditions.
Hmm.
And second tier, the function of second tier would be to make sure students are prepared on their music and then to basically create a seating order, which will be new to us next year as well. But to decide who from each region is going to be included into All-State. So I don't know that there's a need to include sight reading at second tier, especially since we're moving to an online platform next year in order to facilitate statewide judging panels for statewide auditionees.
Right. Okay. So I'll get out of the way here. Just one last question then.
Please.
So if we wanted I'll just speak for Middle Tennessee. If we're going to adapt these standards but we still want to go ahead and say, let's up our sight reading level to, I see what Spencer's weighing in here, like, to a higher standard or whatever, we could go beyond this then.
I see no reason why a region, I think these have to be minimum standards. That at the minimum, these rhythms would be used. These rest, these time signatures, these ranges, these leaps would be used. And if a region wanted to go more than that, I think what makes sense in my mind, though, is just for the fidelity of the scoring, does it make sense to keep the percentages the same? I guess it doesn't because really it's just whoever from the region is going to be, sending those kids in. So maybe this has to be a minimum percentage that the sight reading counts, for each of these years. Because if a region decides to increase how much that sight reading counts for their region, it's still going to send us good sight readers for all states. So I guess this has to be minimum across the board.
Hey Brian, my only concern would be just like especially like in my program, for instance, I've got a lot of people who can't get into choir until their 11th and 12th grade years. So therefore they've only ever had like, by the time we do all state auditions, they would only have like a couple months of sight reading. So that would be my only main concern about doing it in grade levels. I understand the thought process behind it. It wouldn't work for kids who haven't been in choir but have like exceptional voices. They wouldn't be able to sight read as well. And I guess that'll be taken care of with like it being a certain percentage and all that stuff. So it would kind of make it up in the end. But that would be my only concern.
Yeah, who else would like to talk to that? Sharing the concern or having other ideas?
I'll speak to that as well. I there's a lot of this that is I don't want to say that it's going to present a problem. I don't want to put it that way. Hold on, let me turn my video on so I can see you guys.
I'll probably stop sharing too, but I'll pull it back up if anybody wants.
The here in West Tennessee, you know that our festivals are divided north and south, and I'll speak on that in a minute. As far as the sight reading, Sarah is right, particularly in our very rural areas, like the places where Sarah and I both live. It's not unusual for students to not really have access to a choir program at all until they're in high school. I know I don't have a feeder. I don't know if Sarah does. So that means, bare minimum, they're not sight reading until they're in the 9th grade at all. And so that can present a little bit of a problem. I would uh, I would say, I know that in the chat, I don't remember who put it in there. There was a comment about at some point taking the sight reading up to 25% of the score. I think that's really going to have a negative effect on those kids who don't have that same access, I guess. But outside of the sight reading, that aside, because we all know that sight reading is important and our kids need to know how to do it. And I'm certainly on board with having a state minimum standard for sure. just I think some of our rural communities we're gonna have to figure out how we can get up to that standard, I guess, because I know that every semester it's like I have a whole new slate of kids that have not had a music class since they were in elementary school. And, that's a reality for teaching in a small county school. Every semester I have kids turn up that they've never, they're talented, they're gifted kids, but they haven't had music since they were 10 or 11 years old. So, um, I think that can certainly create a problem. Um, we have our festivals divided in West Tennessee in order to give more access to honor choirs for those rural communities, because you have Memphis and then you have all of these, sort of northwestern, lots of rural counties up here who, it when we were all in the same region, or I mean, we're in the same region, but when we were all together, just one all west, um, the population of Memphis is just so large, Memphis and Shelby County. Um, we separated it to sort of help provide more opportunities for those smaller rural areas. Um, that being said, just the northwestern region by itself, we don't have enough numbers to divide the choir up the way that it's to divide it as a 9, 10, and an 11, 12. So that is something that we're sort of looking at, working on. We're not really sure exactly what that's going to look like for us. So, and it's just because it's so different over here on this side because of the way we've had our festival set up for the last, gosh, I know it's been more than 21 years because that's how long I've been teaching and it's how it's been the whole time I've been here. Feel like an old lady, but anyways, those are just some of the concerns that I have. But as far as the setup of what you did for the sight reading, I mean, I think it looks really good. I think the pacing on it is really good, and I appreciate the work that you did on it. It's a really good map. Sorry, I didn't talk for so long.
No, I appreciate that. Carter, I'd love for you to jump in about TMEA and the rural and urban initiatives that we have, equity and music initiatives that we have. This sounds like there's a couple layers that go into this. I think if TMEA adopts these minimum standards, then it gives ammunition to teachers in all different kinds of schools by saying, here are the minimum things that our students are able to do. Our current Bell schedule doesn't allow for that to happen. Our current master schedule doesn't allow for that to happen. Our current feeder program setup doesn't allow for that to happen. And it gives more ammunition to advocate for, a systematic change that would allow for these things to become more possible. And then Carter, like that's one of the things that TMEA's initiatives are very hot on right now, are finding ways to help teachers and students in more isolated districts. You want to speak to that?
Yeah, so from a rural standpoint, that's really been an Arts Ed Tennessee project that TMEA has partnered with, along with TTEA, TAEA, and a few of our general music associations as well. Really to take some content-specific professional development to those rural areas. And we're also looking at some things that we could do at the conference to target our rural population as well as our urban population of not just students but teachers as well. So that educational piece towards the adult is something that we are actively growing as a state. Between David Adelit and Nola Jones, there has been an incredibly strong concerted effort to provide some support that previously really hasn't existed for our urban teachers, Again, with TMEA, for example, in a month, TMEA is going to Metro Nashville public schools and providing, along with the CMA Foundation, a day of professional development for band directors in Metro, and then taking another one for choir directors to Hamilton County Schools. So there are efforts in place, and you are very right, Dr. Russell, that is a point that the association is working very, very diligently to serve. And I'm thankful that you brought up that advocacy point, because you're right. That is as a district leader, that is something that I can take to an administrator or a district level team and say, hey, here's what everyone else in the state is being asked to do, and here is why we are struggling to meet that. How can we work to build that? And that advocacy point is something that we will continue to train as an association to help support those teachers taking back to their district leaders.
As a follow-up to Sarah and Rachel, and anybody else, feel free to jump in on this as well. Does, the combination of these TMEA initiatives and all that stuff combined with the gradual lead in terms of percentages of scores, does that help in terms of giving time for our schools to implement these changes?
Oh, sure. Like I 100% appreciate that it's a gradual lead in and not just bam, hey, this is, 12% of your score or 25% of your score. And so um, I certainly appreciate, that aspect of it. I will say, that part of the issue over here is that this whole, and please don't take this as my opinion, because I'm very pleased with the work that this committee has done and with what you've done, Brian. It makes sense. But this is not what a lot of our directors sort of had in mind when they pushed for, freshmen to be included. We had no idea that it was going to go here. No, I think it's a lovely thing. I think it's a wonderful thing. I really like what you've done, what we've done, not you, what we have done. And I think that some of the sort of pushback for me particularly is going to come from that. Well, I'm going to have some directors say, "Hey, this isn't what we meant," when we said we wanted freshmen in all state. But this is where we are, and it's a good thing. It allows for even more kids to participate in all state, and I think more accessibility to more kids is always the right thing to do. And so I don't know. I feel like I'm talking around. But I think that it's just going to take some extra finessing in West Tennessee to get to sort of what that TMEA standard and expectation is going to be, because it's very different from, we're going to have to set up things differently than how we've been doing them for so long, and we've just got to figure out how we can do that and still provide the most accessibility to the most kids. We just got to figure out how to do that. Northwest, our biggest thing right now is we just struggle with numbers. Especially we always had fewer than Southwest did. And after COVID, it's been a really tough, long, hard climb, to try to get back to the numbers that we had, and we're just not there yet. So, I don't know if that answered the question. I'm not sure if I even remember the original question.
Rachel, with those two separate events, how currently are students in West Tennessee um, selected for all state? Like, is that evenly distributed between the two? festivals? What does that look like?
All state is a separate audition for us. So um any student who participated in the senior high choir with a qualifying score. So I don't know if you guys do this, but we have what we call a one per school rule, where if you have kids come audition, you didn't have anybody make it, we take one kid from every school. But in order to audition for all state, you had to have had a qualifying score, which meant you had to be in the top. I think it's 35 chairs for women and 25 chairs for men. So anybody that participated with a qualifying score goes to a separate all-state audition, and we do that all together, Northwest and Southwest. All those kids, they compete against each other. So, eventually they are all, in the same mix. It's just a separate audition. So I don't know what, because I wasn't on the last meeting, so I don't know what you guys had discussed as far as how to get to All-State from the regional. Like, is that a separate? I know at one time we had discussed um, like a virtual audition that there was like a state panel that judged everybody in the state, or if we're still doing, our, top chairs from each region that we send in. I don't remember what was said there.
Yeah, for that, pardon me, each region will be given a certain number of students that are eligible for second tier. All of those students participate in second tier, and then that ends up being a statewide panel of judges and students. And then the top seeded students from the second tier, regardless of region, go to all state with
Okay.
guaranteed representation from each region.
Okay. Thank you, because I did not remember that. I remember it being discussed. I just didn't remember what we said.
Brian, this is tangentially related, but when we were doing all this planning for sight reading, we base a lot of it on Sight Reading Factory and trying to incorporate that into schools practicing. And we had talked briefly about trying to investigate if we can get a statewide license for some of our rural schools or urban schools that would need help with the program like that. Um, if you use Sight Reading Factory, you can set it to have a leap from do to me and me to so. And once you do that, every single interval will be do to me and me to so, and it's not functional. This is just, I'm curious if y'all who use Sight Reading more than me, Sight Reading Factory, excuse me, know a way to limit things like that. Because as my students have been practicing getting ready for mid state, it helps until every rhythm is a dotted quarter note, eighth note, and every single note is a so me jump. So just curious.
Yeah, one thing we discussed at the last meeting was trying to tie these, different tiers with different tiers on Sight Reading Factory that already exist, like level 1, level 2, level 3, because that is a really convenient thing that our instrumental colleagues are able to do. When I looked at it though, like level 2 and Sight Reading Factory has leaps of a third, but that could be between re and fa, or fa and la, or la and do. And just tonally, we know that that's a different world than do and me and sol. And so what you can do is you can set up custom levels. I remember, you can set up custom levels that can include these things, but I don't remember being limited only to those. Now, it's been a few years since I used Sight Reading Factory. It's been since COVID, actually, since I used Sight Reading Factory with much frequency. But I remember using those with a lot of success, and I don't remember it being where it was only those leaps that were involved.
It wouldn't be exclusive, but it
Yeah.
would. It far surpasses the actual difficulty of a sight reading example because
Okay.
it's randomly generated. If you say that this can include eighth notes, it will give you eighth notes every measure just because it's randomly including. So I just didn't know, and this might be something as a state, if we're pushing towards this and we're trying to standardize the use of something like Sight Reading Factory, if we can kind of reach out to the company and see if we can, just get some higher quality training and see if we can really learn the program.
Well, and I've seen on Sight Reading Factory that you can look up, NISMA Region 4 sight reading levels and, ILMEA, Region 7 sight reading levels. That would be something that I would hope that TMEA could work with Sight Reading Factory on to say, here are the minimum standards for, 2028, and that way students have access to them there. Now, it might still be that the algorithm creates something that ends up being, less musical than what a human will create or more difficult. But that still gets us closer to what we currently have,
No, and the good part about Sight Reading Factory is you just click generate until you get the one that you want. So, just again to reflect on the band piece, what the students are getting isn't just one click and print. It's a person that is responsible for generating those excerpts and vetting them to make sure that they are appropriate and musical. Because you're right, a lot of what, not a lot, but oftentimes what Sight Reading Factory can generate is just an algorithm and it's just a mess and not musical. So that's a good point. And Brian, if you get to a point where you want to set up a call with Sight Reading Factory, let me know and I'll facilitate that. And we'll see if we can meet with them and see what they would be able to offer for us.
Hey,
Yeah.
Brian, you said that you hadn't used sight reading much since 2020. Is there something else that you are using that you like, or do you just sort of write your own?
At Stewart's Creek, we use, pardon me again, everyone.
Bless his heart.
Sorry about that.
You okay?
Oh, yeah, I'm just a mess. We use Carol Kruger's textbook, Progressive Sight Reading. We have a classroom set of those, and so that's primarily what we use to teach sight reading. And then when it comes like a couple of weeks before mid-state or before CPA, I do write a lot of exercises for them then.
Just sort of off topic, I'd love to know, what other people are using. If you're not using the Sight Reading Factory, if you're using something else that you've been, successful with. I think we'd all like to have all the resources that we can get.
Dr. Russell, would you mind reaching out to State Choral Chair Adrian Macklin, and if this is a pretty common desire among the 9 of us, I would imagine the general population from across the state would be very interested in some targeted development, just on sight reading resources, sight reading materials. That would be as some of our other associations are creating some state level professional development, this might be a great one for him to target.
Will do.
Sorry, I didn't know it was going to do that many thumbs. I think even just like a PR type of thing, reaching out, rolling this out, I think it would be very valuable for underserved communities if this on the state level, if we did commit to say we are going to work out with Sight Reading Factory and we're going to set these levels like we are. And I do think that is most likely a possibility that we can do that based upon, like Brian said, that you've seen all these specific states and they've set it up with them clearly, like what they want. That if we are able to do that, and then going a step further, if we could, on the state level, you apply some grants to say everybody in the state will be able to get a license for these students to practice. It's no substitute for, like Rachel was saying, for students that have like roll into your classroom as a junior and they've not had choir. It's not going to be an end all be all, but I think at least it's a, it's a tool that we can say, we're providing this to you, that you can, everybody across the state can log in and start at level 1 or 0 or whatever it is there with Sight Reading Factory and start to work your way up and get some practice time in, and have that as a resource for individual students. I would think as a teacher, you would at least be able to say like, well, here's something I'm getting out of this, and here's where they're meeting us in the middle and like giving us some tools to hand off to our kids.
I think it's a great place to start with, like, especially those newbie kids. I'm sorry, Carter, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I will caution, and I don't know that this is the intent. I don't know that there is a reality where the association gets to a place where we purchase Sight Reading Factory for every student and teacher across the state. I don't think that's necessarily, sorry, my 6-year-old decided right now is the time to come inside. I don't know that that's fiscally responsible for us, or possible. It could be something that we look at, securing a grant for teacher access, and maybe that's how we approach it, because I think that would be a good starting place. But I do want to just make sure that we're aware that that would be a pretty massive financial undertaking.
Well, it seems like we've got lots of good ideas here. I think a goal for us should be at the January 25th meeting to basically make a recommendation to our Tennessee TMEA executive board that these sight reading standards be included in next year's All-State handbook. Now, that would not be officially ratified until the summer, but obviously we need to get it out there to our directors much before that. And so I know that we all have regional events coming up here soon. I think it would be amazing if we could get as many of our high school directors, since they're going to be in one place already, to sit down in a room and, make copies of this, pass it out, and then, really bring back some thoughts on it between now and the end of January. Because, once we hit that January meeting, our goal should be to turn around and be able to tell our regions, here's where everything is, what it's going to be, what you're going to audition on, when it's going to be, here's how they're going to sight read this fall. And that January 25th meeting is our time to finalize all of that stuff. So just one last look through the sight reading standards here. I'm going to share my screen again. There it is. Is there anything on here, especially, for the one that's a few years away, that's, is everybody pleased with where we end up? I'll go on and tell you, I really wanted to add leaps in the subdominant triad. I wanted to add fa to la and la to do to 11 and 12, because, if you can leap in the tonic, dominant, and subdominant triad, and you have everything in here, and plus the dominant 7 with fa to re, then I think that ends up being something that all of our 12th graders would do really well, going out into the world, being able to do. But as we've discussed here today, I don't know if that's reasonable, seeing that we're talking about having auditions probably by the end of September, if we're going to have time to do all of this and have it done by the time of January All-State comes. So after talking to a couple of colleagues, that ended up not making its way in there. And this is basically tonic triad and dominant 7 triads. And, pretty much keeping the rhythms identical until you could add, 16th notes in, 11th and 12th grade way over in 2038. Only adding ties in 2034 and adding dynamics in 2038. So before we go on and create a punch list here, what does everyone think about the rigor of this and how we're going in there? And we don't have to make a decision today, but it's probably good to, us to have a preliminary discussion that we can take to our members in the next couple of weeks as we meet with them. Go ahead, Rachel.
Okay. I was going to ask, I don't know when everyone's January meetings are. Ours is, if that January the 25th is a Sunday, then ours is going to be the day before that, on the 24th. Is it possible? I don't know what everybody else's calendars, look like, but that January 24th is when we have our business meeting, and that's when we also do our second tier testing. Would it be possible for us to move our meeting back a week and do it on the 17th so that all of our things could be finalized for those meetings. Of course, I don't know when when the other two regions are doing those, because if they're on different days, then that's kind of a moot point, I guess. You're muted, Brian.
Thanks. The weekend before that is MLK weekend.
Okay.
And a lot of people, with school being out, might not be available. We met
Right.
last time,
Fine.
a couple of weeks ago. I think we decided that the 25th was kind of the only date that we had a good quorum of us available. But I don't think that precludes any region from putting this information out earlier. Really, we just kind of set this deadline for all of us to, go out there. So I think if West wanted to say, here's when all this is going to happen, we're going to finalize this tomorrow, but we'll let you know if there's a change or something like that. I think that just makes a lot of sense.
Well, we have, and I don't know if you guys do this, but when we have our, regional honor choir, both regions, we have a little staff meeting, teacher meeting, whatever. So it's okay for us to do that in November, that I can share this with them.
In fact, that's why we chose today to kind of talk about this, because it hit all the fun dates before East, Middle, and West have our regional honor choirs in the next few weeks.
I see, I really like I said before, the way it's laid out, and I like how it has incentives for us to try to hit goals, over the coming years. I feel like my gut says we may start adapting those as we go and saying maybe they're a little bit too high reaching for the entire state to hit when we start. But there's nothing to say that you can't just say, this is what we'd like to see happen. And then it's not set in stone. And we start to say, well, it's a couple years in now, let's adapt it a little bit based upon feedback. But I have no problem with setting it as it is right now. And yeah, that's it.
Yeah, we absolutely, as a state, can revisit this anytime. Well, if there's nothing left on that, everyone should have a PDF of these. And again, I think in the next couple of weeks, as we have our regional honor choir events, let's make it a point to put these in front of people, get people in a room to talk about it, and see what sticks. And then we can, discuss it digitally and at our next meeting in January. The only other thing on our agenda for today is to just kind of create a punch list. Here are the things that by that January 25th meeting, we would like to have set up for each of our regions. TMEA is not dictating this by any means, but rather when we first met over the summer, we said February 1st, if we could just tell our regions, here's what next fall is going to look like, then that gives everyone enough time to start making those plans. So jump in here anytime, anyone, and I'll follow this up with an email. But basically, by the end of January, by that January 25th meeting, I think we need to be able to tell our regions, here is when and where, hopefully where, but definitely when, regional auditions are going to be. The format they're going to be, here's what sight reading is going to look like at those regional auditions, and here's the repertoire that 9th and 10th graders will use and that 11th and 12th graders will use. That in itself is a pretty tall order. And I know that some of our regions have done a whole lot of work already and are pretty close to having that stuff ready to put out there, which is awesome. But if your region hasn't done much of that, we've got the month of November, and we all know that December is going to be kind of crazy. And in the month of January to figure that out. So again, that's when and hopefully where regional auditions will be, what 11th and 12th graders are going to audition on in terms of rep, and 10th and 9th graders will audition on, and what the two cohorts will sight read on. And that would be those standards here, assuming they get adopted. And then the biggest other thing we need to be able to tell them is where and when those regional honor choirs are going to be. With All-State moving to January, anything's on the table. Your region can do whatever it pleases in terms of where and when those are going to be. But, you know, that's going to be a pretty big shift for everyone. And telling everyone by February 1st is just going to serve our students and our teachers. What else am I forgetting of things that we need to figure out between now and February 1st? Because we already have, you know, dates pretty much set for second tier, and you know what that's going to look like. So really, if we get the regional stuff under control, we're really setting pretty. The last thing I'll add to our punch list is that, and I'll sound like a broken record, but vocal associations and instrumental associations have to work together to determine this calendar. Because if, you know, MTVA decides that we're going to have auditions on the third week of October, that might be really terrible if that's when MTSBOA is deciding to have their auditions, you know. And it's also the same week as COC and all the other things. So with this truncated timeline that all of our people are going to be subject to, we definitely need to, you know, work together as regional teams in order to make sure that our students, especially those that do lots of different areas in the performing arts, and teachers who teach lots of different areas in the performing arts, need to be able to all do all that. Rachel, what you got?
I just wanted to express a concern. Sorry, I'm trying to get my hand down. As far as the knowing what our students are going to be auditioning on, and I think here's where sort of our setup is going to cause us a problem, just at least maybe in the next couple of years, because we tend to book clinicians like a few years out. So I know that we had already booked clinicians for this year and next year 2 years ago. And those clinicians were booked based on the setup that we have. So that's our own issue. We can work on that. But our students, when they audition on the concert rep. So I don't know that I will be able to have what they're going to be auditioning on in January, because we might not get that rep until, you know, March or April.
Yeah, I think if West decides that they're going to audition on concert rep, then that's what they need to be told in February. You know, February 1st, they're going to audition on concert rep. I think the idea of that was for those regions that currently 10th, 11th, and 12th graders all audition on the same audition pieces. Well, next year, 9th and 10th graders will have audition pieces, and 11th and 12th graders will have separate audition pieces for those regions.
And you guys just have certain pieces that you use and you rotate them year by year, like you have like 4 sets and you rotate them. Is that what you guys do?
In middle, it's a loose rotation. It seems to have been pretty firm for the last maybe 2 or 3 cycles, but going before that, there were plenty of times where it wasn't like strictly followed.
Right.
I think the only thing that TMEA is saying that each region has to do is each region has to audition 9th and 10th graders together and 11th and 12th graders together.
Okay.
And then Rachel, if West decides they still want to have, if Northwest still wants to have one honor choir, you fill those honor choir seats however you want from those 9, 10 auditions and those 11, 12 auditions.
It just has to be separate auditions.
It has to be separate auditions since the whole state is working together on how the whole state is going to function for that.
Right. Thank you for clarifying that. I think I might be making this more complicated for myself than it has to be, which is kind of par for the course for
And I don't think East is going to move to a 9, 10, 11, 12 honor choir setup either. I think Middle is. I'm not on that committee, but those of you who are, that's what I've heard the idea is. But TMEA is not saying that any region has to do their honor choirs a certain way.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for clarifying because my brain is doing gymnastics over here trying to figure things out that I might not have to actually figure out.
Sure.
And I'm sorry I'm so chatty, but I appreciate everybody's help.
No, that's why we do this, just to get us all together and talk.
For Middle Tennessee, I see the where may be one of the trickiest parts, especially if we're going to try to. We're currently thinking that we're going to combine it all, and we're going to have all the ensembles at one time. Finding facilities or a facility or facilities that are available. In my experience, the last couple of years, the when has had to be adapted a little bit based upon the where. And that's just a chicken and the egg thing, and we'll figure it out. But I think if we get our goal, I see it as being sort of a general, here's the week or two window we're hoping to have it in, and going from there.
Yeah, I think the idea of this is serving our teachers, giving them, the peace of mind going into the spring semester. Here is what is going to be expected of us in the fall semester. And if some of those details end up coming later, but just as much as we can give them now, it's just going to serve everyone. There's going to be enough change coming down the pike. As much of that as we can smooth over now, the better it's going to be for everyone. Well, to make everything actionable, I'll follow up here with an email that kind of outlines what the punch list is. I'll reattach that PDF of the sight reading standards so that everyone can bring it out there. Our next meeting will be 3 p.m. Central on Sunday, January 25th, with the idea that that's probably the last meeting of this group here. And we'll go from there. To close, Carter, I'm going to put you on the spot. Because one of the things that we talked about at the caucus meeting this past year was the state's overwhelming desire to add middle school honor ensembles at the state level. And originally, this Tiger team was going to be tasked with starting that process, developing a team and kind of passing off that baton to middle school teachers. Carter, I think there's already been significant work. You don't have to give away the store, but can we say that this team's that work has already begun, so that maybe this team is no longer charged with that, right? Because
that is accurate.
Okay.
Yep.
Excellent. So there's already work to be done. And Carter, is the thought that this either launches in 2027 or that there's significant work between now and then? What can we commit to?
Yeah, no, the intention is for all of the middle school ensembles to launch for the 2027 conference.
Excellent. Well, does anyone have anything else to add to our meeting today? All right, everyone. Well, I think we have done really good work here to make the lives easier for our teachers and students, and also to make sure that students long term are being taught and learning what we think is a representation of our values. So all the good things are coming out of this. Thank you for your work. All right. Goodbye, everybody.